X spread a rumor I was a criminal to get me fired. Said I'm just protecting people from you. I collected every lie, got her charged with defamation, and watched her lose her job, reputation, and friend group. It all started on a cold, gray Monday morning in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of day that's heavy with mist, settling low over the mountains. I remember watching the fog swirl around the tops of buildings as I walked into the office, a small real estate agency where I'd worked for nearly a decade. We were a tight-knit group, just a handful of us, but we knew each other well. Or at least, I thought we did. Odessa was there, perched at her desk, her eyes bright with her usual energy. I'd met Odessa when we were just kids at college, and she quickly became my best friend, almost like a sister. She was the kind of person who could light up a room just by walking into it, with her auburn hair always perfectly styled, her laugh contagious. When she needed a job a few years back, I got her one at the agency, convinced that we'd be a dream team. Levon. She'd called out cheerily, waving at me as I set down my bag and shrugged off my coat. Big day today, huh? Biggest day of the week, right? I laughed, rolling my eyes. I was already on my third cup of coffee by then. Little did I know that Odessa had a way of making every day big, especially if she was at the center of it. For the first few years, things were fine. We'd go out for drinks after work, gossip about clients and celebrate each other's wins. But something in Odessa started to shift. I began noticing that she'd angle for the spotlight in client meetings, edging me out in subtle ways, claiming credit for my ideas, acting like I needed her to back me up on every deal, as if she were the expert and I was still learning. I chalked it up to her competitive nature, even when she started taking digs at my performance, saying things like, "Hey, Levon, maybe you should leave this one to me. You know, for the client's sake." But I let it go. After all, Odessa was my friend. Then things escalated. One day, after a meeting, I heard her talking to Dave, one of the agency partners. They didn't know I was still around. I was just about to leave for lunch when I heard her say, "Dave, I'm not saying Levon's untrustworthy, but I don't know if she's handling her clients properly. I just worry about the reputation of the agency, you know?" My heart dropped. I didn't confront her that day. Instead, I went home and stewed over it, hoping it was some bizarre misunderstanding. But over the next few weeks, she kept planting these little seeds of doubt. I started noticing that colleagues looked at me differently, with a kind of skeptical reserve. It was subtle, but it stung. Then, everything came crashing down. One afternoon, I got called into the boss's office. Dave and his partner, Alice, sat across from me, looking tense. Alice was flipping through a thin folder, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Levon, we need to talk," Dave started, clearing his throat. He was an older guy, bald and usually calm. But today, he wouldn't even meet my eyes. "What's going on?" I asked, my stomach twisting. Alice looked up, fixing her steely gaze on me. "We've received some concerning information about you. Odessa claims to have seen some unusual activity on one of your accounts. She mentioned you might have mishandled some client funds." I felt like the ground had just dropped out from under me. "Mishandled funds?" I repeated, my voice a shaky whisper. "You think I'd do something like that? Dave, come on, you've known me for years." "I'd never." "Levon, we want to believe you," Alice said, her tone cold. "But we can't ignore what Odessa's reported. We have to put you on administrative leave while we investigate. You need to understand, this is for the good of the agency." For the good of the agency. The words hung heavy in the room. My mind was spinning, trying to process what was happening. Odessa had accused me of stealing, my own best friend, who knew me better than anyone. And they believed her over me. "Dave, Alice," I said, my voice wavering but firm. "I swear on everything, I didn't do anything wrong. I've always been above board with all my clients." Dave sighed, glancing at Alice before saying, "Levon, we want to believe that, but the evidence, Odessa says she's seen the documents." "Documents?" I was nearly yelling. "I don't even know what she's talking about. Look at my records." "We will," Alice interrupted, her voice icy. "For now, take the time you need. We'll be in touch." I left the office that day, my cheeks flushed with anger and humiliation. I could feel the stares from my coworkers, people I'd known for years, people who were now questioning if I was a thief. As I walked to my car, I caught Odessa watching me from the window, her face unreadable. The weeks that followed were like living in a nightmare. No one from the agency reached out, and every attempt I made to clear my name was shut down. Friends I'd known for years wouldn't answer my calls. Even my family seemed skeptical, asking, "Levon, just be honest with us. If you're in trouble, we can help." "I'm not in trouble because I didn't do anything." I'd shout back, my frustration eating away at my sense of control. My sister Priscilla, usually my biggest ally, gave me that same disappointed look, the one that implied she believed the whispers more than me. A month after that awful meeting, they officially terminated me. No explanations, no apologies. I was done. Odessa, it seemed, had filled the role I left behind quite comfortably, and I was out on the street. Overnight, my life as I knew it vanished. No job, no friends, and a reputation in ruins. People whispered, stared, even avoided me in the grocery store. There was one afternoon, I was buying milk, and I saw Janet, an old colleague. She turned away when she saw me, pretending not to notice. But I saw the quick, pitying glance she shot me as she hurried off. That was the hardest part, people treating me like I was some kind of criminal, like I'd done something unforgivable. I couldn't stay in Asheville. Everywhere I went was a reminder of my shame. I left town, moving to Greenville, South Carolina, where I found work at a retail store. It wasn't glamorous, but I needed the job, and it was a chance to start fresh. I made a point to keep to myself, avoiding friendships or anything beyond small talk. It was safer that way. Years passed. I built a quiet life, saved every penny I could, and stayed far away from the real estate world. But that bitterness never left me. I'd spend sleepless nights thinking of Odessa, wondering how she could live with herself after what she'd done. Then, one evening, almost 8 years after I'd lost everything, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, figuring it was a telemarketer or a wrong number. But curiosity got the better of me, and I checked the message. "Hey Levon, it's Martin, from the old agency. Look, I know it's been years, but there's something you should know about Odessa. Can we talk?" Martin? I hadn't heard from him since I left Asheville. My heart pounded as I dialed him back, half hopeful, half terrified. The line clicked, and his voice came through, hesitant but familiar. "Levon? Hey, long time." "Yeah, Martin, long time. What's this about Odessa?" He took a deep breath, and for a moment, I could almost hear the guilt in his voice. "Look, I ran into her at a party last week. She'd had a few drinks, and she started talking." My chest tightened. "What did she say?" "She was bragging about the agency, how she was a top agent now. And then she started going off about you. She said she'd had to make up those stories to protect her career. She said you were too much competition and that she needed you out of the picture. She admitted to lying, just like that. Like it was nothing." I was silent, my mind racing. My heart felt like it was being ripped open again, but this time, I was seeing everything with a terrifying clarity. "Martin, are you telling me she admitted it? She actually admitted she lied?" "Yes," he replied, his voice heavy. "I recorded her, Levon." I couldn't believe it myself, so I pulled out my phone. I couldn't believe it. After all those years of shame, guilt, and anger, I finally had proof that I'd been innocent all along. Odessa had admitted it herself, in her own words. My mind buzzed with the possibilities of what I could do with this recording. I felt a strange mix of relief and rage, like I'd been carrying a weight for so long I almost didn't know how to let it go. "Martin," I said, steadying my voice. "Would you be willing to send me that recording?" "Of course," he replied, without hesitation. "I don't know why I didn't do more back then. I'm sorry, Levon. We all should have been there for you. I think a lot of people would want to know the truth now." A rush of emotions welled up in me, gratitude, bitterness, a craving for justice. I thanked Martin, barely able to keep my voice steady, and within minutes, the recording was in my inbox. I played it, listening to Odessa's drunken confession over and over. Hearing her laugh about needing to protect herself by framing me was like a dagger in the heart, but this time, I was ready to turn that weapon back on her. With the recording in hand, I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in defamation cases. She listened to the audio and read over the statements I'd gathered from my family, who had seen my suffering all these years. By the time I finished my story, she was shaking her head in disbelief. "This is a clear case of defamation, Levon. We can absolutely take this to court. With evidence like this, I don't see how she could win." So we began. A lawsuit was filed, and a court date was set. News spread fast in Asheville. The town was buzzing, and I knew people were talking about me again, but this time, there was curiosity in the whispers. People wanted to know what Odessa had done, what I'd been through. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of shame lift a little. The day of the trial was nerve-wracking. I wore my best suit, determined to show everyone that I was no longer the broken woman they'd discarded. As I took the stand, I looked around at the people who had once shunned me. Many familiar faces, former co-workers, old friends, were sitting in the crowd, watching with quiet anticipation. Then there was Odessa, sitting at the defendant's table, her face pale, her confident smile nowhere to be seen. She barely looked at me. Her lawyer was leaning over, whispering something to her, but she sat stiffly, clearly rattled. My lawyer played the recording. Odessa's voice filled the courtroom, echoing off the walls as she bragged about framing me, laughing about how easy it had been. There was a stunned silence as the audio ended. Odessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushed with embarrassment. When my lawyer questioned her, Odessa stumbled over her words, denying everything, trying to spin it. It was, taken out of context, she said, her voice weak. But it was no use. The evidence was undeniable. The jury saw through her lies, and when the judge finally delivered the verdict, it was in my favor. Odessa was ordered to pay significant damages, an amount that would make a serious dent in her comfortable lifestyle. But that wasn't the part that mattered to me. What mattered was that the truth was finally out, and Odessa's mask had been ripped away for everyone to see. Her reputation took an immediate hit. Word spread around town that she was a fraud, a backstabber. Her clients started pulling their business from her. Friends avoided her, colleagues treated her with that same skepticism and mistrust she'd once fueled against me. She was ostracized, left to face the very isolation she'd inflicted on me. But I wasn't done yet. I posted the recording online, along with a brief statement about my story, how I'd been framed, how I'd lost everything because of a lie. I didn't name the people who'd abandoned me, but I let everyone know what Odessa had done and the years of damage it caused. The story went viral in town, and her remaining reputation crumbled. She tried to defend herself, but no one would listen. People avoided her on the streets, turned away when they saw her at the grocery store. She was done. Over the next few months, I received apologies from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some of them were sincere, others were just trying to ease their guilt. I accepted the ones I believed, ignored the rest. I didn't owe anyone forgiveness. They'd left me in the dark when I needed them most, and now, I had no interest in welcoming them back into my life. With the settlement money, I was able to start fresh. I didn't go back to real estate. Instead, I used it to open a small bookstore and cafe in Asheville, something I'd always dreamed of. The store became my sanctuary, a place filled with light and laughter, where people came to find solace in books, coffee, and quiet conversations. One day, as I was restocking the shelves, I saw a familiar figure outside the window. It was Odessa, her hair disheveled, her clothes worn and plain. She looked older, tired, her once vibrant energy replaced by a weariness I recognized all too well. She hesitated at the door, catching my eye. I met her gaze, feeling a strange mixture of pity and satisfaction. For a moment, she opened her mouth as if to say something, but I held up my hand, stopping her before she could speak. She looked down, her face crumpling, and turned to walk away. As I watched her disappear down the street, I felt no anger, no bitterness. Just a quiet peace. Justice had been served.